Okay. All right. Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Justin Warner. I'm the paid media marketing specialist at Intellum. We help the largest and fastest moving brands in the world successfully educate their customers, partners, and employees. For 20 years, we've been observing and rethinking how people learn and collaborate. Customer education is a practical solution to a lot of issues organizations face with retention, revenue, and achieving crucial business outcomes. Customers buy products and services, but struggle to thoroughly understand how to use them. This problem is common because architecting a learning journey is hard and often results in an education program that exists in multiple places and lacks true personalization. Intellum is here to help. This webinar series underscore is our way of providing more insight into what customer education is and can be by propping up our experts to share their knowledge and practical advice right here inside the powerful Intellum platform. Today, we're presenting Exploring the Connection Between Customer Education and Customer Success with Greg Rose, and Ruben Rabago. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so feel free to pop your questions into the chat panel, the Q&A chat panel, and as they come through the webinar, we'll go through those. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to two of you guys and let you guys do your thing.
Thanks, Justin.
Kick us off, Greg.
Yeah. I assume that everybody knows us, and so it's like I don't know that we have to do big introductions here. I'm the CXO at Intellum. Ruben's the CCO. We can talk another time about our backgrounds. I think we want to jump into this topic and really start to dig in. We got a lot of ground to cover. We think it's gonna be fun. We want you guys to be engaged, throw questions into the chat. Our team here is kind of watching the chat, and so if something, if you got a question, ask it, because they're going to sort of monitor that for us while Ruben and I are just doing our thing and talking. And if something comes up that's relevant, they may interrupt us, and we'll deal with the question. Then, if not, we'll try to get through all the content so we've got time for a Q&A. I do want to start in a very specific place, though. So I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Ruben wrote a book. Yeah, that's right. I joke because I assume that a lot of people that are on the webinar today, and we've got quite a few, I assume, especially those of you that are CS professionals, know this book intimately now. This is the Customer Success Professionals Handbook. It is the proof point that Ruben's the guy to be doing this webinar today. I think we're very lucky that Ruben decided to join us at Intellum. He can tell us a little bit about that. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. Even if you're not a customer success professional, this illuminates, I think, the truth about customer care right now. It is an exceptional read and a great guide. Tell us about the book, Ruben.
Well, thanks, Greg. I didn't think we were going here, but yeah, a little on the spot embarrassment. A little bit on the spot embarrassment is all good. Yeah, it's been really, honestly, a very humbling experience. It was, it was the first time author for Ashwin and I. I can tell you, it was like literally one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my career. It's been incredibly rewarding. But really what compelled us to write this handbook was, there was plenty of information sort of about customer success and how important it was. And, there was really the imperative to executives of why you need to stand sort of a customer success program up. But there was no clear definitive literature that described the how-to. And how to do customer success, and how to perform the actual function of a CSM, and how to operationalize it across sort of the customer journey. It was a really tough project because sort of to encapsulate just the breadth of things that had happened over sort of like the course of 10 years of the initiation of customer success was really keen. But we also wanted it to be about a community voice, and so it wasn't just Ashwin and I. We approached over 24 contributors. So that, I know where you're going.
I'm going to put you on the spot one more time before we dig in. So, hey, Ruben, when you were working on the book, which again, I think is like literally one of the best books about this topic on the market. Here's another secret. I actually wrote a chapter for this book. What happened to my chapter, Ruben?
Well, let me just say, I'll start by, I understand that some of the best scenes ever filmed in Hollywood and ended up on the cutting room floor. But for those of you who know, that is absolutely true. Greg wrote a really amazing chapter about customer education and the intersection of customer success. But Ashwin and I, frankly, we over-rotated it in our writing. You add that to all the contributors that we asked, including Greg. And we had overwritten some 20, 25, 30,000 words, I think. That's like the equivalent of about 5 or 6 chapters. So we came back to the publishers like, hey, here's a 2-volume set. They're like, no, thanks. That's not what we asked you to do. And they, it was a really harsh conversation. It was like, we could either do the cutting or you can. So, if you want us to chop up your baby, we'll be happy to, but we figured we'd do the surgery and Greg, you just didn't cut it, man. So.
Well, I mean, listen, all kidding aside, the reason I forced us through the beginning of that conversation is because, Ruben, I think you would agree, like, as we worked on that chapter for the book, we had some really kind of amazing, illuminating conversations.
That's true. We did.
For those of you that have joined us today, what Ruben and I did was basically go back to that exercise. And we've structured the conversation today around the work we did when we were sort of pulling together this chapter on this idea that there is a connectedness between customer education and customer success. Before we roll on, I just want to make one other point, Ruben. I think that aren't you now like the best-selling business book author in Japan? Isn't that what I read?
Yeah, so that was one of those unexpected things, sort of like the Beatles going #1 in Japan. We're #1 in Japan, Ashwin. Yeah, I think it's actually right over here, which is really cool to see this. I don't know if the audience can see this. To have your book translated into another language is again just incredibly overwhelming. And we're not currently #1. It sat on the #1 like hot releases for quite some time. I think it's about 12 weeks. Pre-order and post-order, which was sort of followed the same thing as when the US release happened. But dude, let's get moving. Enough of the book.
Enough of that. Okay.
Come on, enough of the book. Let's get going.
I want everybody to have a background and understand enough about where we're coming from as we launch into this thing. We want to talk to you guys today about 2 really important things. You guys that have joined us need to lead a content revolution inside your organizations. And we are the 2 guys who can show you how to successfully engineer that revolution. Now, I know that sounds like a bold statement, but what we know going into this is that you're really here. You've joined us today for one of 2 reasons. Either you're a customer success professional who understands intrinsically that education is the key to helping clients reach their desired outcomes. I think there's sort of this intrinsic sort of CS lens that allows you to see that. Or you are someone who's working now on customer. You may think about it as external, but for just simplicity's sake, let's say customer education. You are working on the act of creating the content that teaches someone how to use a product or service. And even if you're in marketing or HR or L&D or sales or product or support, either way, whether you're a customer success pro or you're working on customer education, your focus is on helping the individual user achieve the outcomes that matter most. Ruben, do you remember when we were working on the book, I said, something to you that I think I should turn into like true marketing content. The phrase was, customer education activates customer success.
Yeah, first of all, I thought that was really smart. Um, and I thought you thought yourself was really smart by saying that too. But it was really sincerely an aha moment for me. And I sincerely believe that probably now more than ever, having joined Intellum, it's one of the reasons why I came, because that single statement, right? Customer education activates uh, like whole customer success. It made so much sense. Maybe to say it a little differently, uh, I believe companies can't completely attain or claim they've delivered like holistic customer success without fully implementing and activating a customer education program. And this is because, again, this is something that here I am. I've been a CS professional. I have that book, right? And I have become enlightened just in the last probably year or so about customer education's really, I've come to realize, is a often misunderstood and most certainly an underused, I would say, sort of secret supercharged engine of scale for customer success. If we think about that for a moment, right? Properly educating your customers, it's undoubtedly going to bolster your product adoption. And it's, in a way, this is the cool piece, right? That's inherently one to many.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even better, it's going to be even on demand or self-paced and tailored to that specific learner. Right. So what's really cool about this whole thing is, like, remarkably about the same time frame as the advent of customer success. I've learned that a fundamental change was underway in sort of like the whole modern business learning experiences, and you get this alignment of related technologies sort of enter customer education, and really for the first time, the technical capabilities, the data, the alignment. Um, you know, we now have the ability to customize the learner experience at scale. And I believe Intellum was the first to that table.
It 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 sounds smarter when you say it. I think you do a better I think you do a better job of encapsulating that than I do. But I do think it's true. I think there is no better way. This sounds sophomoric, but we're going to dig into this idea of why, I think, as we progress today. But there is no better way to ensure your clients are actually achieving the desired outcome than to teach them how to achieve the desired outcome. It sounds sophomoric, but it's not something we do very well today. This is a quote from a famous biologist. His name is E.O. Wilson. His whole argument is that there are a small group of fundamental natural laws that run the entire universe. So he believes that there is a need to strive for a single unified theory of everything. The reason we don't have that today is because we think about knowledge in silos. We think about math, we think about science, we think about humanities and history in a vacuum. We don't truly understand how our world works, and the magic that sort of exists behind it. When we were working on the book, we talked about this quote too. And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
You go.
No, I just like it. It just blew my mind. Well, number one, again, here's Greg dropping another truth bomb on Ruben, and it's like sounding really smart, and but it does capture the problem, right? And I think this captures this quote captures the problem. Truthfully, I think every company is facing right now. Like, our customers are starving for knowledge that fundamentally is going to help them reach a specific outcome using, sort of your products or services. And but what's also the reality is they're overwhelmed really by an ever increasing volume of information.
Mhm.
That we've created to help sell and support and deliver and onboard and like amplify and expand your customer. It's too much. And so like I think this just perfectly like summarizes honestly also how I still feel most of the time. How can I as a human like navigate sort of our respective business worlds, like possibly know I face this literally almost every single moment. Like, what's the most important thing for me to learn
Mm.
that's going to help me change sort of my behavior? Um, that's going to help even at a really micro level, bolster my own performance, how I do my job, um, uh, how to bolster my team's performance or the company's sort of acceleration to the outcomes we're trying to attain.
That is, my friend, the perfect transition into our first poll. So I'm gonna ask Justin to help us out here. We want to get a little bit of feedback from our audience. I'm curious, how confident are you that your customers know how to achieve the outcomes that your company has sold them? In other words, as software companies, as providers of products or services, we do a really good job of positioning outcomes in the sales process. How confident are you that your average user actually knows how to achieve the outcomes that they were enamored with in the sales process?
They are coming in, 56% voted. Get your votes in.
Great. Kelly's asking on the chat for clarification on the poll question.
I think that the question is just, again, on average, when you think about your normal average user, how confident are you that they actually know how to use your product or your service at an expert level? Are they able to attain the things that they actually purchased your product or service to do?
Okay, give it a couple more seconds. And results.
All right. This is not uncommon, Ruben. I think you can, if you want to officially read out where we are.
Yeah. So people are moderately confident that your customers know how to achieve the outcomes they were sold.
Yeah, moderately confident. That doesn't surprise me. I think that's what we see when we talk to clients and to people in the space. I think it's mostly common that people say they're moderately confident, but there's a lot of room to improve.
No one is extremely confident. I think is the key. Like nobody voted that way, right?
Exactly. I think, the thing to remember here is that as companies, we have all gotten really, really good at creating content, right? So when you look at this screen, I bet most of us on the webinar see multiple things, if not all the things that we all do as companies, right? We create sales collateral, we create product marketing information, we have blogs, we have how-to articles, we have case studies, we have thought leadership pieces. We build knowledge bases, we set up help centers. Our customer success teams are now creating and disseminating their own content. We invite our customers to product launches, to cross-sell, upsell events. We create user conferences. And to get all this done, we leverage content management systems. We stand up websites. We've got knowledge-based tools. We create landing pages, all of this in an effort to get all of this content out in front of the customer.
Yeah, but what's happening, Greg? Right? So like our all of our customers are drowning, right, in this absolute ocean of content we've created. They don't know where to turn. I think we should go to the next slide. um, and you know, the truth is, like, do they go to the help desk? Do they contact support? Is there a user forum to go to? Is there dedicated learning? Like, how good is the information that I actually have? Yeah, the truth is, like, we're really great, like you said, at creating it, but really bad at teaching our customers how to use like all of this stuff. And it's easy if you have a really simple solution, but in most B2B enterprise um, uh, uh, apps, or sort of even in that tech stack, that there is nothing simple about moving a whole organization towards optimization on your product. So again, I think at the end, like, is this experience of trying to master your product ultimately a positive or a negative one? So just as a thought experiment for the audience here, it's not, we're not actually going to do a poll, but just really want everybody to sort of contemplate this for a second, from the perspective of your customer, and think about the different personas of your customers, right? So you have your executive user, you have your sort of like a primary sort of business owner, or multiple business owners if you've managed to get across cross functionally, and then sort of the end user who's actually in your product, leveraging your system. Like, is their experience of trying to ultimately like master your product from beginning to end, from going from wherever they were using before to having to use your system for the first time, in their mindset, is it typically a positive or a negative one? All of the things that sort of wrap around the change management aspect of it, having to learn the system. And what is that like for them emotionally? So I'll just sort of sit on that for a little bit, but
it's the word master that I focus in on too here, right? Like not just using the product, but actually mastering the tool, the product, the service, like getting the most out of the product. How confident are we as professionals that we're actually helping our users or our customers master the concept? And Ruben, I think it's time for a little tough love, because the answer is it's a negative experience and we all know it.
Yeah.
Every company, I think, realizes at some point that getting through this ocean of content and being expected as a customer or a user to know how to find the thing I need in the moment to help me in the moment in which I need it the most is not an awesome experience, and it can be vastly improved. I mean, this is even true for Intellum. I'll be fully transparent and say that several years we've gone on our own sort of odyssey. The line I'll use is that cobbler's children don't wear shoes, right? Like we spend all of our time helping big brands, like and fast moving companies, like figure out education and how to do these things we're talking about. And like looking inwardly, even we had to come to the realization that we weren't doing what we even told our clients to do. Like we had to sort of reboot over the last several years to get to sort of a gold standard of education ourselves, to be able to help the user attain mastery of our platform.
Yeah, I think that's true, Greg. I mean, I could tell you from my own journey as well. Even when I was an individual contributor at Gainsight as a CSM, is like one of the hardest things was to just literally keep up on all of the changes that were happening in the product, right? I feel like CSM team members, like, they get just as stuck, pardon me, as our clients do.
Yeah.
Trying to find like that one piece of content that's right for this particular customer's scenario or their ask. And I think that's true for customer education professionals, by the way. Like, think about, like, if you're having trouble honing in on the right resources, like, again, at the right time to support that specific customers, like, how can you expect them to be able to do it on your own when you're having the hard time, like, finding, what the right thing to do to either elevate yourself or your customer at that that particular thing. So, I think again, this goes back to the again, one of your truth bombs, Greg, is like we're really great at selling outcomes or the concept of it, or painting what we like using the term art of the possible, right? We're really good at that, but we are not yet great at teaching our customers how or the users how to achieve those outcomes sufficiently and self-sufficiently.
I totally agree.
So I, I think I do want to go back to this. And again, the thing that you've dispensed on me and sounded so scholarly when you did, like we are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. And most companies, most organizations, CS, customer success, it really defines sort of this old corporate structures. It's intended really horizontally, reaches across sales, marketing, product, all, and really sort of breaks down those functional silos. Part of the core mission of CS professionals is really to help illuminate and connect all of those dots so that our customers can be successful irrespective of where they are in the journey with us, right? And we've created like this really complex ecosystem for them to navigate.
I think that's true for education professionals too. Like in a lot of organizations, I think people who are working on educating customers, whether you see yourself as a true dedicated customer education professional or not. I mean, I think we should be viewed as function area agnostic, right? It doesn't matter sort of where we sit in the organization. And I think that the goal is to educate the customer into mastery of the product. And that in order to do that, you've got to sort of pull together the SMEs and the stakeholders and the content, all to sort of for the greater good of the client. It's the same sort of experience, back to the needle in the haystack thing. And it's almost as if customer education people and customer success people should be working together on this problem.
Yeah, I want to point something out here, though. And it is actually to this point, right? So, engaging customers is not a singular motion. Right, it does take absolutely a symphony of players. They each have to begin to learn to participate sort of in unison to help that customer attain their goals. On the customer success front, those professionals who've been in that realm, we've learned that it like requires relentless monitoring of your customers and managing it through whatever phase, adoption, during the onboarding, maybe going through renewal cycle, like whatever phase they're in, and intervening when progress begins to stall or you start seeing a trend of poor health. It also means like having like absolute clarity on what your customer stakeholders deem as success to them, right? And how do you measure that unilaterally? That's mutual, so that everybody has clarity on what goals you're trying to help them achieve. Here was another aha moment. It's like getting your customers to that initial goal that you set is not enough, right? Your company's products have to continuously improve, as does the experience your customers have with them. So just because you land them, just because you get them onboarded, just because you renew, doesn't mean you get to sit back, right? Your product is going to continue to evolve, as well as should their experience with your product, right? So here's the catch. How do you teach them, or how do they learn to use your product is critically important. It's even somewhat more important, right, as reducing the noise of the content that you provide them, right? So, because you don't want to go in the opposite direction. That's exactly what's happening. Everybody's thinking more content is going to solve the problem, but it's actually reducing the noise of what content is right. So, I know you've heard this if you're from a CS perspective, like delivering the right message at the right time for the right customer. Well, it's about delivering the right content or the right targeted training experience at just the right time. And sort of to deliver that promise, it is going to fundamentally need and lead to a sort of a unified system of knowledge that sort of spans like all of these offerings. But
So I think we got some.
yeah, go ahead. Were you gonna say something, Greg?
No, go ahead, Ruben.
Well, one of the bad news is like, all of this stuff doesn't exist. Like this contextualized, holistic, cross-functional approach to content doesn't exist, right? Think about it. You said it earlier, right? Marketing has their content, SDR, sales engineers. Actually, in some cases, each one of them have pockets of content specific to sort of their functional roles that they use and they dispense to their teams. But those pockets of knowledge and pieces of content are actually could be very valuable to the end user or to the buyer or to the CSM, right? Or professional services, onboarding, CSMs, support, product documentation. The community's creating their own set of like articles and documents. Like everybody has their own content, and it's frankly just overwhelming to the customer, and it's rarely aligned even internally. You just have way too many pockets and buckets of disconnected and disparate pieces of content and a lot of overlap.
Yeah, that is accurate. I think there is good news though. And I think the good news is that I took a look at all of the attendees. I looked at titles and companies and where people are from in preparation for this today. And the good news is that each one of you is positioned and should build this content revolution yourselves. We say that in most companies it doesn't exist. And I think that's true. We have the viewpoint, the vantage, the great honor of working with some really amazing companies. I mean, we work with some large companies like Google and Facebook that have done a very good job of moving in this direction. We work with some smaller companies, more nimble organizations like MindBody or even Gainsight, that are not huge resource laden organizations that have also done a good job of beginning to move in this direction. And I think the commonality is that there is always a single person who picks up this challenge and begins to drive it. And I think these people who have made great progress against this goal have left us a sort of roadmap that we can follow in terms of how to do this thing.
Yeah, I agree. Let's come back to this phrase. Number one, because I think it just continues to contextualize this topic and help provide a guideline. But it's like, customer education activates sort of your customer success strategy. Greg, one of the things, and activation was something that I even had to ask you about. Like, what does this actually mean? Like, activation.
Activation is a term that gets thrown around on the marketing side. It usually is used by a marketing agency when they're referencing like using some kind of experience or experiential technology to create connections and great experiences between like a brand and a customer. So an agency will come in and do this experiential thing that forces the customer and the brand to align, and it creates great brand experiences for the individual. I think when I think about that, like, isn't that what we're trying to do here? Is it helping the customer achieve the outcomes that we sold them, the best possible customer experience? And I'll say that again, like, is it helping the customer actually achieve the outcomes we sold them, the best possible customer experience?
Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt. Like, and I think this is another one of those sort of let's pause and think about this. Right. It's sort of funny. It's really meta. Like customer success and customer education are essentially what you're saying is both charged with helping the customer to be successful as possible with your company's product or solution, right? But how they're actually helping are they changing the user's behavior, right? It sometimes we're so focused on like stuffing content in front of a customer without measuring whether or not there's a change in behavior,
Mhm.
right? And most companies aren't thinking about it this way, because it's not necessarily about the consumption, it's about what happens because of the consumption, right? And some really forward-thinking companies are already here, but I think, and I can tell you, I'm starting to see like this emergence of CS and CE, customer success and customer education, becoming more in lockstep, and because they're aligned to the same business objectives, right? Which is renewals and more cross sells and revenue. And if I just sort of break this down, if you just give me a few more minutes, I know we're getting a little bit short on time here, but like for instance, CE, customer education, is developing and prescribing content that leads the user to mastery. In the CSM world, right? They now have visibility to that education related data to the customer. So a CSM, for instance, can observe, like, is a customer progressing through onboarding, and what pieces of content have they consumed in education as part of that, right? And what education content the customer is choosing to consume on their own, and at what point along the journey, and which personas favor like which content. And what's really cool is you can sort of see the before and the after data indicators of what that sort of progression and the full suite of telemetry that you have on that customer before they took a sort of collection of content. The before and after is, like, better said, like, what have I internalized as a user, right? And so the CSM can really begin to help the customer in directing specific sort of like learning initiatives, and really to sort of help engineer and again ultimately shift the user's behavior. And I think perhaps like the biggest win is ultimately like elevating the customer's understanding of what's not being used in the product, or what's not being used well, or what's not sort of grabbing this. So yeah, again, I think all this like just essentially just feeds back to metrics.
No, I think it always is about metrics. We get to this point in a talk track like this all the time, right? And we see sort of two reactions. One is like, okay, you guys have convinced me that this is a thing. I got it. We just spent a good bit of time walking these guys through like why there is a connection, what the connection is between the two things, why we have to be striving for a unified system of knowledge. The fact that everybody on this webinar has the opportunity now to go back inside their organizations and begin to work towards this, because it is going to have very real tangible impacts, which we're going to talk about in a second. I think, the thing that is true is that people generally will say, cool, you guys have convinced me. I'm a customer success professional. We don't have a dedicated customer education initiative. I don't have anybody to do that work. We have a knowledge base. Marketing owns, customer outreach. Like, how do I get started? Or vice versa. I'm a person working on customer education, but like, we don't have a CS mission. Like, who are my partners? How do we get this thing done? And when I mentioned earlier that there are a few people who have actually done this well, or are moving towards a pretty significant milestone in this area, they've kind of all done four things. And I think with the time we got left, I'd like to kind of walk quickly through what those things are, because I hate it when I join a webinar and they tell me all about the why, but never show me the how. And I think we can actually break down, for the purpose of this conversation, some very specific how things that'll make the biggest impact for you. Let's start, Ruben, with convergence. And I know we're getting kind of close on time, so we can blow through these real quick. Let's make sure we get 5 minutes for some Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, the simple concept is, like, in one way or another, I think if you sort of latch onto this term convergence, it sort of helps describe your initiative, because it's really about grabbing champions from various sort of functional roles across your organization. It's probably good. Jump to the next slide. For instance, like, if you're a CSM, it means like maybe you're seeking out some like-minded peers in other departments, like product and marketing and support, and sort of pitching this idea. And if you're a CS leader, you might own CE or other departments. But, like, fair warning, again, these are one of the landmines. If we could drop some advanced warning, and you may know this already, but sales and marketing and product and support leaders tend to be conditioned to own or believe that they have ownership over their content. And I think if you walk in knowing that, this idea of sort of like convergence begin to sort of break down that mental barrier. And again, I think it's really important that you begin to demonstrate sort of from the beginning how the single source of truth is going to help them, right, better achieve their unique sort of customer goals and initiatives. Again, it's all about driving business outcomes.
And that word convergence is an easier word, I think, for people to latch onto and understand. And you're right, it doesn't get you into land grab territory, which would make everybody offensive. I think another important part of doing this right is to adopt a methodology. Now, that's a term you're going to hear from Intellum all the time. We created a scientific procedure for creating, deploying, measuring, developing ROI, tying all of this work back to business outcomes. It is our big differentiator. We talk about methodology a lot. I am not going to walk you guys through methodology in 5 minutes. Last month, our Chief Strategy Officer, Vicki Kennedy, did a great underscore on this topic. I mean, I think the title of the thing was connecting to business outcomes. And so I think what she does is walk through this in great detail. I would highly encourage you to go do it. In fact, I'll ask Justin if he's paying attention, which I'm sure he is, to drop a link to her webinar into the chat, because you should go sort of look at how there is a methodical procedural approach to this. Now, I am biased and think that ours is very, very good. But I think the point is that you should have some kind of approach that allows you at the highest level to do 4 things. You've got to understand what the learner really needs to know. And when you go through that work, you've got to begin by tying it to the business outcome. There's no point in doing this to do it. That's not going to yield change. It's not going to force behavioral change, right? To Ruben's point, you've got to understand the actual needs and make the early connection to a business goal. When I'm talking about business goals, I mean things like revenue, retention, or support costs, something tangible that we can change.
Like for instance, Greg, just don't go on saying, I want to stand up a certification.
Yeah, exactly. Certifications are great, but they're part of a bigger project, right?
That's correct.
Why are we doing a certification? And why do people need to be certified? And is a certification the way we're going to actually get someone to mastery? It may not be. So you've got to go through all that work. You got to look at your existing content. You got to make sure that that there are things, while there are things you could probably use. Vicki will talk a lot about how education is not marketing, marketing is not education. And so, you got to figure out where you're going to have to create new content. And all of this has to work for discoverability, personalization, flow of work. It is a big undertaking, but it's not impossible to do.
Right. And so I'll step in here really quickly and just say, start pretty slow is my guess, but do we have time for a poll? Do you want to do a poll? Do you want to skip it?
Let's skip it because I want to leave time for the Q&A.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm saying.
What we're going to do is ask you guys, how much content do you think you need to do this? And we'll go ahead and tell you the answer. The answer is not a whole lot of content. People get this confused. They think that in order to make this viable, they have to launch this massive initiative. And the data says that is not true. The most successful programs start small. They start by taking one specific initiative that has a very clear metric and building education against that initiative, using the success of showing the behavior change by deploying the content, measuring it, improving it, expanding, shed what didn't work, double down on what did, use that content, then use those successes to demonstrate why you need to expand into the next sort of topic or concept. The greatest tactic you've got is the consistent addition of new content. And this proves that you can start small, right? People think they have to launch this mega massive thing. And the truth is you can start small and consistently add new content, because new content, data shows us after 20 years of doing this, new content is by far the biggest engagement tactic. It will bring people back. All the gamification, all the engagement that's built into these platforms, the best way to bring somebody back is to release relevant content to them.
Amen on that one. Let's jump to step forward.
Yep. So I think the last point here that we want to make, and I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, is that like, I'm a marketer, and marketers know that drip campaigns work. They work because you can sort of consistently, slowly release information that proves your point, that influences people. And I think when I look back at some of the folks who have done this really well, one interesting thing I've observed is that they all go through this drip process to align their stakeholders, to connect people. They slowly release information. Some of it's from third parties that prove out their point. Some of it is from their early successes and their sort of own start small campaigns. The challenge is that people say they can't find proof that this works. So one thing Ruben and I wanted to do was share some proof with you. So I'm going to make all this available for you after the fact. You can come, you'll be able to get the webinar. Robin on our team was telling me we're going to pull all this together in a one pager so you've got access to this and can use it yourselves. What this shows is a client who went through this process. Now, what they realized was that their biggest that their customers had access to multiple things at one time, and it was disparate. It was also overlapping, a little confusing. They had knowledge base, they had support, help desk had been turned into a pretty big, robust environment. They also had a pretty aggressive sort of marketing content management system where they were pulling customers in to receive more like product information. They went through this process of establishing the unified system of knowledge. And I think what happened when they introduced it, as you can see on the timeline, is that engagement, and engagement here is defined by content consumption, skyrocketed. Well, okay, no duh. Like they took 5 different things and they merged it into one thing, and a lot of people came to the one thing. So that's what you would expect, right? But what's interesting is that it didn't just shoot up, it hockey sticked. It went up and engagement stayed up. More importantly, they built this initiative from the beginning to look at 2 things. They wanted to see if they could determine the impact in revenue and the impact in customer retention. And over the course of that first year, they saw a 20% increase in sales and a 22% increase in customer retention. And the reason is because they gave people a much better, unified, clear destination to get the answers to their challenges, their problems. The second thing I want to share, and people use this in drip often, it works really well, an unintended, sometimes unsuspected consequence or impact of this kind of work is on cost. So we had a client who looked at power users and recognized that like they had this group of individuals they thought of as power users. They realized that they weren't doing a great job of educating power users against like new products and services. So they invested, they spent some time, they built out some pretty significant education content aimed at power users. They launched the content. The result was surprising. The first thing they found was that for the power users that completed the prescribed content, the engagement tripled overnight. It was literally like people went through the content and they started becoming engaged. They stayed engaged in the destination. They were consuming more and more content. The second thing they found, which they didn't intend to, this is what the data told them, they didn't set out to look at this, but what they realized was that there was a massive reduction in help desk tickets across the board. Like there was a 37% reduction for all users. And what they realized was that power users were submitting more tickets than normal users. And the reason was because these power users who were deep into the platform and the product couldn't figure out how to achieve the thing they were trying to achieve. They also found that the tickets that those power users did submit after all of this work became what they called high value tickets, because they weren't submitting like, hey, I can't get this thing to work. I can't run this report. This outcome isn't happening. They were submitting tickets like, I now understand all of this and using it correctly. I want to now go to this level, which required them purchasing another product or service, which they were happy to do because they now understood how everything worked together. And the last bit of information I'll share, and I'll ask Justin if he's up for it to also drop in the link to this page, which you can get to from the site. But we did some pretty extensive work with Forrester, and we had Forrester go out and sort of survey business and look at the impact of this approach. And they looked at some of our customers, but they also looked at companies that aren't our customers. And it was a wide range of industries and a wide range of company size and company profile. And what they found, frankly, even surprised us. The average impact of just going through the exercise of starting this kind of work is like a 6% positive increase on top line revenue, not just revenue, but your top line number. The same is for retention. 11% top line customer satisfaction score increase. I mean, the data is starting to prove out that this idea we've had for a long time holds true. Ruben, we need to jump to some Q&A, but before we do that, real quick, is there anything in these numbers that you want to call out?
Yeah, I mean, use these numbers to help justify your start. I mean, that's just the simple perspective here is like, getting these kind of initiatives at scale. At the end of the day, it's going to require budget, right? Start small. You don't need budget. You can use what you have and, measure that keenly and intensely. Build your findings, talk with your peers at other companies who've already gone through this process, and then bring this slide with your presentation to your executives. I think it'll definitely them help. So, Justin, let's turn it over. Unless we need to do anything else from a house cleaning standpoint. Love to get to some questions.
One just came in. Michelle, what was the name of the book mentioned at the beginning?
The Customer Success Professionals Handbook.
Yep.
It is available on Amazon.
A couple that came in earlier, Karina, this was during the tough love. How do you make it a positive experience for a client without hand holding?
Ooh. That is, it's a great question, Ruben. You want to start? I think, okay, I'll start. I think, yeah, that's a great question. And I want to, because we don't have a whole lot of time left, I want to take this offline with you. So I'm happy to chat about it. I think the most important thing there, when I think about how to make the experience positive for a client without hand holding, the most important thing that I have learned over 7 years here working with Intellum, it is all about the architecture of the content, the thought process behind how this destination is organized so that the user can do two things. You've got to make sure things are organized well for search, for discoverability, so that when the individual user is coming in the moment and just needs to get to the API hooks because that's what she's looking for, she can get there. When she searches for it, she gets to the relevant content. I would suggest that you look for, if you don't have this today already in place, a platform that can do smart results so that it's taking into account who she is, what her historical activity on the platform has been, what her profile is, to make those recommendations as good as possible. I think the second thing you've got to do to make that experience great is prescribe an experience. So this is where things like pulling together events and knowledge base into like educational content makes a lot of sense, because you can start to create a user journey that's based on a persona. It's more prescriptive. We can generally make some assumptions about the individual user and say, we know that this person is, in audience 1, persona 3, therefore they need to generally know these things. And you can create that experience for that user. So when she comes in, that's what she's presented with, not a one size fits all kind of experience. It's like there's some personalization at play already. And then you allow her to discover what's important to her.
Okay.
Do we have time for one more question?
Go ahead, Ruben. Go ahead quickly.
No, I thought
Yeah.
Greg did a great job of answering. I was just wondering if we had time for another question. If we're out, that's cool too.
Does anybody else have another one? There was one other one popped up here. Yes, how to unify the various customer touch points across the content ecosystem of knowledge base, blogs, videos, email, course offerings. as much as possible. How can we situate learning at the moment of need?
Ooh, again, that sounds like its own webinar, man. That's a great topic. We should do that. I think it is viable and important that users have access to multiple content types. Nobody wants to sit and watch scorum-based content all day. It's done. It's over. We've done a lot of work to ensure that our clients don't have to rely on scorum. They can have all the tracking they need without that just sort of talking head video thing. Now, there are some places where scorum is applicable, but I think you've got to make sure that you're building out curriculum using lots of types of content. I think you need to be able to give people the option to look at just video if that's what they want versus knowledge-based articles. I think I'm going to go back to the same thing I said before. A lot of this has to do with structure. I think if you're dumping everything into one environment, thinking that the user is going to swim around and figure it out, you're mistaken. I would lobby for a clear stream for knowledge base, a clear stream for curriculum, a clear stream, but you've got to have an approach to technology that allows those things to live in one destination.
Okay, we are at 2:01, so close it out. No, be mindful of time. Greg, Ruben, that was incredible. Thank you for your insight, vision on how customer education can really transform customer success. Thank you to each of the attendees for participating in our effort to break down essential customer education topics and equip you with the tools and strategies to build robust and effective CE programs. As Greg mentioned, the recording of this webinar and a copy of these slides will land in your inbox early next week. So start thinking about which teammate you want to share it with. Also in that email, consider completing our survey just to let us know your thoughts about Underscore and how we can add more value. I hope you'll join us at our next Underscore on May 13th with our partner HonorLock, the leading AI-based remote proctoring solution as we tackle the hot new topic of certifications. You can register for that simply by clicking the little calendar at the top of your screen. Again, my name is Justin, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Justin.